Habari yako, jina langu ni Mombi Geteria. Nilizaliwa Nairobi, Kenya.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, मेरा नाम तैयबा शहजाद है। मैं 6 साल की थी जब मैं कनाडा आई पाकिस्तान से।
Báwo ni orúkọ mi ni Fikayo.
Hi, my name is Jessie Brar, and I'm the founder of A Melanated Guide to Mental Health. When talking about immigration and mental health, it's important to keep in mind that moving, no matter where in the world, can take a toll on your mental health. Moving comes with a lot of learning, unlearning, and relearning, and it's important that we're keeping our mental health at the forefront throughout this process.
For me, the one major difficulty was being so far from everything I knew. I think I had traveled to Canada before when I was 14. And so I think I didn't expect to have such a big culture shock. And I felt just so lonely. I felt like no one could really understand my personality because it's so different how people relate to each other back in Kenya versus here. And then the winter was so hard for me as well. The first winter, I would call my mom just crying because I was like, I can't be here. It's so bad. It's so cold. I'm so depressed. Like, it was challenging.
First of all, I was freezing cold because we came in November, and coming from a country like Pakistan where it's almost always hot, that was a huge, different experience for me. When I started going to school and meeting all these people, I was just really happy. But it wasn't until we had to move again in grade 7 and grade 8 for me. I attended grade 8 in Burlington, and I wasn't prepared for what I was going to experience there. I went from almost 80% multicultural people in Mississauga to 80% white people in Burlington. And that's, for the first time, that's where I felt culture shock. I felt different.
I don't think I was fully accepting and aware of the fact that I was actually depressed until maybe the first summer I went back home for 2 months. I think that's when it really hit me, oh my gosh, because my energy was so different. I was so much more myself again, just going back home for that time. That's when I really came to realize, oh my gosh, I'm kind of depressed there because I was so much more like a shell of my full personality. And I would just almost isolate myself unconsciously because I didn't really feel comfortable being around the people that I was around at the time. It was just difficult also being in a city, such a small city where everyone who was in that university was mainly people from small towns in Alberta coming into this city. And so for a lot of them, I was the first Black person they ever saw, which was whoa, for me it was a bit of a, I just didn't expect that because Canada is branded as this multicultural, which it is in certain parts, but certain parts is just very white, where everyone wants to touch your hair and fucking touch your skin, which is weird. No offense to, but if you're watching this and you're not a person of color, asking to touch someone's skin is a bit wild.
No one had taught me how to navigate being a brown girl in a very white-centric school. So I just had to learn along the way, which resulted in a lot of times where I just felt super anxious and depressed and confused about what I was feeling. I would get questions oh, it's summer. Why aren't you wearing shorts? Aren't you hot in that? Or questions oh, I don't mean to be racist, but there was this person on the news, this terrorist, and he had your last name. And for me, I didn't know how to respond to that because my immediate response was, no, that name is really common. I felt like I had to defend myself for something I hadn't even done.
Sometimes I will journal, maybe not so much now, but when I first started doing it, I would journal and then I'm writing up something about what happened in my day. And as I write it, I'm whoa, this was actually triggering. But in the moment, because we just kind of sometimes dissociate when something triggering happens, I didn't fully realize this was not a positive interaction. And so if I wasn't journaling, I'd have never known that was a negative interaction. And continue putting myself in the same kind of situations. So I'll say journaling was one major thing for me that helped.
I did it a lot on my own in silence because I didn't know how to talk to anyone about it. I'm the oldest of 4 siblings, so I couldn't really reach out to them. And my parents, as supportive as they were, didn't know how to address what I was going through. Pretty sure they didn't even realize what I was going through. At times, resorted to self-harm even, because I got to a point where it was really, really something I couldn't handle anymore, being constantly seen as different. What I would have benefited from is a lot of positive role models. It really helps to have someone set an example of what it means to be your ethnic background, what it looks like, and that what you're feeling is okay, it's normal, and how to navigate that while you are pretty much you're juggling 2 different identities.
Yoga was another major thing for me. I started doing yoga just before I left for university because my mom was doing yoga, so I would go with her sometimes. So I think realizing I'm depressed, I would feel like, okay, right now I feel like I'm close, like I'm resisting something. So I'll specifically look up a yoga video on YouTube that's like to open your heart. And that's when I started to realize like, wow, yoga is so much more than just how you look or being flexible or whatever, but it actually helps you to come out of your head. When I was feeling so depressed and like frustrated, it's because I was only focused on that. And my thoughts were just like going and going and going. But when I took the time to stop and just like, okay, let me just take an hour and do an hour of yoga, then for a whole hour, I'm not thinking about that. I'm just being present in the moment, being in my body.
I resorted to media which had, somewhat portrayals of people who were brown like me. I can't look back and remember specifically what shows because there weren't that many at that time. But now as an adult, I'm seeing more and more representation of my people on the screen. I'm a huge avid moviegoer, and I love reading and I love collecting books. And now I'm seeing and looking for books that are written by POC authors, that is own voices, that represents my story. I also had conversations with my friends who were going through similar things. So finally opening up about my struggles opened up a whole new level of support for me.
I've not personally faced, mental health challenges, but one thing I know is that in Canada, it could get lonely. Having community and forming that community really, really helps because you get to build your own family. It's like home away from home. One thing that I really, really know has helped me a lot is that I constantly feed my mind with positive thoughts. It's not only community, but it's really on building I would say guard or building a lifestyle of positivity. I would say I'm a very optimistic person and I believe the best is yet to come. So that has really, really helped me because I just looked at even bad or dark situations and I'm like, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And there is hope. No matter how bad you think it is, right? There is hope. And there's probably someone in history that is going through this same exact situation that you're going through right now or has gone through this same exact situation that you're going through right now. And they came out of it, right? So you can definitely come out.
Honestly, even though it was really depressing in the beginning, I'm kind of happy I went through that because it pushed me to be more conscious of actually taking care of myself and, yeah.
If I had, at the time in grade 8, spoken up about my feelings and been very clear, like, I feel like an outsider, here's why, or maybe you should ask questions a different way. If I was a bit more confident to do that, I think my experience would have been much different. That being said, I don't regret any of it. It shaped me into the person that I am now. And I look at that experience as something to grow from and learn from.